Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you for joining this morning's webinar, an introduction to FME Server. My name's David Eagle. So in this session we're going to look at a few things focusing around the FME Server product specifically. So I'll give you a brief introduction of the general architecture and environment that FME Server offers. We'll take a look at the interface, a brief guided tour, but the bulk of the session will focus on some of the FME Server services and the kind of things that you can do with those services. So we'll be specifically looking at a handful of demonstrations around the FME Server technology. So very briefly, a little bit about OneSpatial. We're a Safe Software Platinum partner. We have a number of offices around the world, and we work with a number of different vertical markets, from military to central and local government, assorted utilities, transport authorities, that kind of thing. We've been working with Safe Software and FME for a good many years now. We work and support the main products, FME Desktop, FME Server, and of course FME Cloud. And we have a number of skilled certified FME professionals and trainers. I myself have both of those certifications. We of course carry out a number of different services around the FME product stack. You're more than welcome to ask us a little bit about what we do. Please contact us if you're interested in that kind of thing on fme@onespatial.com. So this is the three main products. FME Desktop is the authoring environment for building your ETL processes. FME Server is the enterprise solution, and FME Cloud is FME Server hosted on Amazon Web Services. So that's the focus of today's webinar. So here's a little slide that describes the capabilities of the two products. They are a server-client pair. FME Server itself is not really a lot of use to you without having FME Desktop. Generally, you would have an FME Desktop license in which you would author your ETL processes, your extract, transform, and load processes. It's a GUI environment, graphical user interface. You drag and drop readers and writers and transformers to carry out your data processing. You can run them on FME Desktop, but quite often organizations wish to put those processes into the enterprise environment up onto FME Server, where they are scalable if your data volume increases, and also you can come up with environments that are a little more robust. You can also take advantage of FME Server scheduling and notifications, so it's the sort of the next stage in your FME life cycle, your ETL life cycle. When you interact with FME Server, generally individuals in an organization assume different roles. For smaller users of FME Server, what you can find is that the same individual wears a number of different hats, but larger organizations have specific FME Desktop experts, people who are authoring the processes and building those ETL routines. There may be a system administrator who helps install and manage the FME Server environment. You might have a software developer who effectively front-ends your FME processes to integrate your routine perhaps with your own internal intranet, or perhaps as a public service to provide a data download service to members of the public or contractual organizations. And ultimately, there's going to be the person at the other end of the web page who may be actually downloading some of that data. So they're the user. So a number of different roles generally. The FME server architecture is summarized on this slide, but you're going to want to go and have a look at the FME server full documentation really to get a feel for that, and I'll just hyperlink out to that in a moment. But effectively, you have some clients of FME server, so that could be one of the FME server services. It could be FME desktop itself, Workbench. It could be a custom application. Effectively, you're going to communicate with FME server via the API, and in its simplest form, you're effectively building a URL to trigger a job to run. The brain of FME server is this FME server core. That's where a lot of the job management and the distribution of jobs is handled. That goes off to the engines that are going to do your processing, and you can have one or more engines depending on how much throughput you have, what concurrent level of processing you want to carry out, and you will record information about those jobs in the repository database. Now, by default, that's an instance of Postgres that gets automatically installed by FME server, or alternatively you can point it at your own Oracle or SQL Server database, whatever you prefer. I mentioned I'd go out to the FME server documentation. Well, the document is here, and you can see that there's the full architecture diagram with also all of the communication port information. So if you want to get to here, really the best place to go initially is if you go to knowledge.safe.com. Once you land on the knowledge site, you'll notice that there is the option in the top right corner for documentation. If you dive over to documentation, if you scroll down, you can see that here's the FME server documentation, and that's the main document that you want to reference for any of your initial FME server questions around how you'd likely install it or use it, what sort of approach you would take. So very high level at this stage. When it comes to FME Server Engines, if you're an FME desktop user already, you'll be familiar with the fact that you open Workbench, and if you look in Task Manager, you'll see FME Workbench.exe sitting in the Task Manager. As soon as you hit the green Run button, FME.exe starts, so you have one of those engines in FME Desktop. Well, with FME Server, you can have as many as you like. The benefit really is that they are always running, so they're always listening for a request. You don't have the overhead of having to wait for them to start and stop. Generally, you'll have one assigned per core, so you wouldn't install more engines on a machine, or license, I should say, more engines on a machine that had more than you had cores. So if you have a 4-core machine, you're not going to want to install any more than 3 or 4 engines on that machine. They offer failover protection. There are a number of fail-safe mechanisms in place, so certain engines will try to restart themselves a number of times if there's a particular problem. And if you want to scale your environment, you just add more engines. Obviously, you have to pay for them. It's not as simple as just adding more, but the implementation of just adding more engines is the case as simple as just changing your license. Architecturally, you don't necessarily have to do a lot more on your installation. If you want to size an FME server instance, you really need to just ask yourself 2 questions. What's the volume of throughput? So how many jobs are you going to be submitting? So how many users are going to click run on a particular job or initiate a task through a web interface or from the REST API? How many jobs are going to come to FME per minute, per hour, per day? And importantly, how long do those jobs take? If you are going to have 1,000 requests a minute and those jobs take 5 minutes each, then with a single engine your queue will increase rather a lot, and you're not going to catch up on those jobs, so you would need more engines. So you need to just have a think about your general throughput and timings. Quite a lot of the time people who buy FME server will buy initially either a single or two engines. If they go down the two engine route, they would send all their short run jobs to one job and all their long run jobs to another to another engine. So it means that certain users can get a good response from processing. All of this is extremely high level at the moment. When we start to look at some of the things you can do, you'll get a feel for some of the options here. Generally, how does FME Server work? Well, typically you would have a bunch of FME Desktop users, perhaps, who are running their workspaces on their machines, and as they click run, the data processes, but those machines can get tied up doing that processing job. What would be more effective is to upload your FME workspace to FME Server. FME Server, the assumption is that it's installed on a machine that has a UPS connected to it, a battery backup. It is more robust, it has data backups done on it, and it's most likely going to be more powerful. Now, these individual users now can get on with their day job knowing that the job that they have published to FME Server and then logged in through a web browser and run is happily working on another machine. As soon as that FME workspace, that ETL routine, is available on the server, though, it also makes it available to many other clients. Those clients could be desktop users, browser users within the same organization, they could be external, or it could be machine activities that are triggering jobs in response to a particular message or notification. So perhaps an email is sent to a particular account with an attachment. FME Server may just strip the data off and translate it and reproject it and send it back. That might be an example of a type of routine that you do with FME Server. If you at any point need to adjust the process that's on FME Server, you might want to re-download the FME workspace, adjust it, and then upload it again. So you have this cycle of editing and restructuring of your FME processes when needed. FME Server Licensing, one thing I want to touch on if you've been using or are already familiar with FME Server, FME Server 2016 introduces its own licensing approach. So if you've been used to using FlexLM licensed technology in the past, that has now gone away for FME 2016. That gives us a greater flexibility with how we can license your engine usage, and there is the possibility that at some point in the future there will be the ability to offer burst licensing. So if you have a requirement to have a lot more engines for a very short period of time, that may be possible as a result of moving away from FlexLM. So it's the FME Server core that now manages your licensing rather than a separate floating license client. The licensing, though, is on a per engine basis. It's not per CPU, so it doesn't matter what hardware you install FME Server on. You purchase and license X number of engines, and if you install it on a super powered machine, it doesn't cost you any more than putting it on a less powerful machine. Some software is costed like that, so it's worth mentioning. Jobs are queued. If an engine isn't available to run a job, then your job will sit in a queue, and ultimately it will be passed to an engine once that engine has finished with the job that it was working on at the time. So that means that you can manage your responses to the users. It is very much a server-client pair. You have FME Desktop that you build your processes in. You can run them in desktop, but it's likely that if you have FME Server, you would publish them to server and run them over there instead. FME Server runs workspaces. That's what it does. So this is how you would do that. Build the process in Workbench. Go to the File drop-down menu, and you can see there's a Publish to FME Server button here. You upload that workspace to FME Server, and importantly, you register it with a particular service. I'll come on to what the services are in a moment. At any point you could download from FME Server, so you download a workspace, edit it, and then you could put it back. So you have this cycle of authoring and editing of processes that are then hosted up on FME Server. One question we get asked quite a lot actually is, do additions matter on FME Server? Well, if you're an FME Desktop user, you'll be familiar with the fact that you've perhaps bought FME Desktop Professional Edition or FME Desktop Database Edition, this fourth tier here. Basically, if you have FME Desktop Professional Edition, when you author a process, you can't write data into Oracle, for example. Well, that means that FME Server isn't going to be able to do that either. So whatever your desktop edition is, effectively is what your FME Server can do. So author a process to write to Oracle. If you need to do that, well, you need the FME Desktop Database Edition, and then the workspace that you've produced will, when hosted on FME Server, be able to write into Oracle. It's as simple as that. So if you want to go and have a look at some of the formats that are supported in the different versions of or editions of FME Desktop that you have access to, just go and have a look at www.safe.com/formats. If you go to that URL, you will see the different data formats that are available and the editions that are possible to work with and whether they can read or write. This snippet here, you can see that all the editions can do exactly the same as each other. If you scroll down the list, you'll find some formats that aren't able to be worked in until you get into editions that are further to the right here. So let's go and have a guided tour of the FME Server interface, just to get a feel for the general environment and what you have access to. I'm just going to pop this browser onto screen, and you should be able to see that now. This is my local instance of FME Server, and those of you who have seen it before know that FME Cloud also has a very similar interface because it's FME Server in its own right. So I'm just going to log in. And here's the FME Server 2016 user interface, and if you ever want to know what build you're running, you can see that detail is down here. So it's a pretty recent FME Server build, 2016 1.01, build 16494, and it's the 64-bit FME Server. A couple of things I would urge you to try and adhere to is, if you're running FME Desktop and Server in the same environment, you want to try and build match as much as possible. So it's wise that you build processes in FME Desktop build 16494 and publish them to the same build of FME Server. If you start superseding your desktop build to the FME Server that you have installed, there is the possibility that you're going to be putting transformers on the canvas in desktop that are not yet available in FME Server, and your process will therefore fail when you publish it to server. So just be aware of that. The other way around is fine. If you have an old version of FME Desktop but a new version of Server, well, then you shouldn't trip over any problems. So you get these high-level buttons at the top here where you can decide what you want to do. If you want to run a workspace or manage a schedule, you can also see that under Manage you've got the ability to go under Admin and go and see what engines you've got, and you can see on my build here that I've got access to 4 engines. And interestingly, if you've got a keen eye, you'll notice that I'm also running different bit versions of engines. So there's a lot of flexibility over how you configure your FME Server. I have 4 engines running, 3 of them are 64-bit and 1 of them is 32. Why would I do that? Well, if you go to that website I gave you the address for, safe.com/formats, and toggle the tab to platforms, you'll notice in there that some of the formats are only available on a particular bit of FME, and that's often because the vendor of that format hasn't yet moved to 64-bit. So for example, the the Esri personal geodatabase format is only available and is only possible to work with, to read and write using 32-bit FME. So if you had a workspace that you needed to publish to FME Server and give personal geodatabases to certain individuals who were accessing Server, well, they would need to make sure that they ran that job using Engine 4, and then they would get their geodatabase, their personal geodatabase written out. So just a subtle thing in here. You can see that FME Server also supports database connections, so if you had any specific databases that Server needed to support, then the 2016, well actually as of 2015 database connections are supported, save you having to pass usernames and passwords into and store them in workspaces all the time. You can do the same with web connections. If you want to go and find out what, as an administrator, what jobs have been run on this process, you can see that here's some of the jobs that I've been running, and you get an indication of whether it was a good job or a bad one. Did it fail? You can go in and click the jobs to rerun them, or you can go on find out what the details of the logs were. You can also set up some resources. So a resource is effectively a directory that stores some data on your server, and I've actually, I think, got a data set up, so this is something I'll use later on my FME server machine, which typically is not the same machine that I'm using all the time. It's generally a machine on a server rack somewhere. There's a directory, and on that, in there I've got a little SQLite database sitting waiting to be used. So that's a handy resource for this machine. We also have, as I said, the ability to go and manage the workspaces that are hosted on FME Server. So if I go and manage those workspaces, you'll have a series of folders. I have some stock examples and samples and some utility workspaces stored away here. The samples you'll get if you install FME Server with all the content. So these sample workspaces are handy for testing your FME Server installation. So once you've installed FME Server, go and see if you can run one of these. You can see that I've got Austin download process here. I could go in and configure it. These parameters are available to edit. So I have a set of publish parameters. Publish parameters are what you would normally see in your navigator window in FME Desktop. So I can come into here and decide that I want to have airport data and centerline data in a particular coordinate system and a particular format, and you can choose a search envelope, and then I can choose to go and run that workspace to go and get the output data. In this case, I'm running it under something called a data download service, and hopefully what that's going to do is provide me with the data at the end of a download link. So we'll let that get on with it, and there we go. So I could download that zip file now, and in there hopefully we'll see the zip, and if I extract that into here, we can see we've got a KML file ready to go. So what we've got is a simple interface that we can use to do a data download of some data. So that's all I want to do for now around the interface. We're going to get into extra bits of the interface in a short while. I want to run around a few specific examples now to give you a feel for capabilities. The kind of things that you do with FME Server, really, there's definitely a focus on automation. The idea here is that you have a very robust machine sitting somewhere on your network that is scheduling and running scheduled jobs. A number of our customers have FME Server sitting with a bunch of schedules defined. Workspaces start at certain times of day or night or over the weekend to guarantee that there's some decent machine time usage. And organizations will perhaps take web services download them overnight. Perhaps there's a WFS that you need your WebGIS to have access to, but your WebGIS doesn't have native support for a WFS. So perhaps what you do is you schedule a process to run every week. It reads data from the WFS, downloads it to a local file geodatabase, and your WebGIS consumes a layer from the file geodatabase. So if you run that process, it gets the data, it's always up to date, and it runs it every week. So your geodatabase is always serving into your web mapping environment the latest content without you manually having to go and download that data. Self-service capability is very important around FME Server. It allows organizations or individuals to go and grab data that they need from a definitive source. So you could create an FME process that has a front end on your web page, and it allows a user to log into that environment, define the data layers that they're interested in today. Perhaps there might be a map front end. They could draw a bounding box to download that data, and the data is definitive because it's coming from your internal database or your definitive single source of truth. And that data can then be made accessible to people within your organization without them having to come directly to you, or outside of your organization, and perhaps you might put a paywall in front of it so that they have to purchase content from you. Real-time processing, well, this is all about notifications. In the US, the Weather Network has a large sensor network for lightning strikes, and FME Server is effectively collating that information and posting it to an environment which is published to the Weather Network's app, so that when you access that and have a look at the current weather, you would see that there had been X number of lightning strikes within a few kilometers of yourself. So real-time information, data processing triggered by an incoming message of some description. So these are the services that are available. I want to just highlight these so you can see them in one place. The key ones at the top are the kind of things that you'll interact with on a daily basis when you're the FME author, the FME process author. So effectively, when you build a process, you would register it with one of those services, those four at the top: the data download, the job submitter, the KML network link, or the data streaming service, and they determine what FME Server gives you back. So I'll get into the detail of those in a moment, but for example, if you registered a process that in FME Desktop reads from a folder full of shapefiles and creates a geodatabase with a conflated layer in it, then if you registered that with the data download service, a user would log on to the web page, would define the data that they wanted. Perhaps it was based on a clip region, and they would then get a zip file returned to them in which would be a file geodatabase. So the response from the data download service is to run the job, but to compress the data into a zip file and put it at a web accessible directory location and serve up a URL for the user to download that. The job submitter service just runs a job, so you're effectively just running a job over on another machine. That's very useful when you're wanting to schedule a job to run on a resilient machine. KML network link is very specific to Google Earth. It allows you to have effectively live information potentially, so vehicle tracking it can be used for. It can be used for wanting to get an individual to zoom into a particular part of Google Earth and certain data being made available. Effectively, the KML file ends up having a URL in it that triggers FME Server to run a job. So it's an interesting example. Data streaming means that you have to author your process so that it writes to a streamable format. So be that writing out HTML, which there's a new HTML writer in FME 2016. That's streamable. Obviously, that means that a new tab would open, so that's very useful for creating validation reports to give back to an individual. Or perhaps you want to stream a raster. Raster will open up in a web browser. KML streams into Google Earth. PDF streams into a PDF client in a browser. So there's all sorts of capabilities. You can create your own web map service using FME Server or your own web feature service. Those processes would be effectively created off the data streaming service. Down at the bottom, you've got effectively helper services, so things like the REST service, the ability to interact via a URL, via an application through the REST API to get FME Server to do something. The token service gives you security against those applications. All sorts of variations. Data upload service allows you perhaps to create a data download service into which you upload some data. So that allows a user to upload a MicroStation DGN file and then download or translate a DWG. So they have a mini translation service within your own environment. Rather than that user having to know how to use FME Workbench, they do translation through a web browser instead. So let's go and have a look at some real-world examples, some approaches to running these. And I've made up some rather interesting, perhaps, acronyms. Data as a service is a thing. TAS, translation as a service, is that a thing? Well, it is now. There's a few more sublime to ridiculous examples of my acronym construction in a moment, but you'll get the idea. So data as a service, well, I've suggested an approach to that. Download a selection or a clip of data, but do that as a self-service approach. So let's go and have a look at how that works. Well, there's a knowledge base article on the FME Knowledge Center, well worth you going and looking at if you haven't done already. The knowledge center on knowledge.safe.com. This article 1117, that suggests just how many there are over here, gives you a description of what this is, how you can build it yourself. You can go and have a look at a number of different examples. Let's go and have a look at the Google Maps one. But I could swap this over to use an ArcGIS background if I wanted to. The idea is that with this web map front end, the web map front end, by the way, is not FME Server. That's something that you build or your web developer builds for you. Here we have an approach to defining a boundary we might be interested in, and that automatically starts to build the query. This is effectively the URL that's going to be passed to FME Server to get back the data we're interested in. You can see that as I click into bus routes, we get another parameter added to the URL, and the same when we go for bus stops. We might decide that we want that data out in lat long, and we want the data out as a shapefile or shape files. If I request the data, then it's available to download immediately in the interface. So now if I go and have a look, here's the zip file. I can go and extract that, and there's the shape files, points and line geometries that we wanted, that we downloaded. So effectively you are a user that's sitting potentially outside of the organization that's serving this data, and you've now got just the data that you're interested in. When it comes to translation as a service, this is where you might want to run a little internal translation service for colleagues. Perhaps colleagues are always being given AutoCAD DWG files, but they don't have AutoCAD. They don't necessarily know what to do with the DWG, but they do know what to do with the MapInfo tab file. So you could define a little easy translator, and certainly when you install FME Server for the first time, you actually get a variation of the workspace that, or the example I'm about to show you. So here there's a little easy translator demo. If I go over to the live demo, you can see that you can go in and have a quick look at the front end here, and you can see that I just need to upload a file. So I've got a MicroStation design file that I'm going to drag over here. It's a DGN file. So if I select that file, that's what I want to upload. A MicroStation DGN file is a file-based data set that has multiple levels inside it potentially. I might want to upload and translate that into a particular format. I've made a fixed list of formats available here. So I'll go for that map info tab format that I specified there. You'll see that you've obviously got a shorter list than in FME Desktop. Well, that's because the user authored the workspace to only allow the ability to write those particular formats. You can see that there aren't any raster formats in that list, and that's because this is a process to allow vector processing. You could handle raster data, but this demo doesn't do that, and that's on purpose. Here you can see we translate the data, and now we can download it. And if we have a look inside this zip file, I'm just going to pop it open rather than extracting it. You can see that in here we have our map info tab files, and these were the level numbers inside the incoming DGN, so there were 3 of them. So just a couple of examples that you can approach. When it comes to other types of data service, well, the validation as a service one is a very common one that people will look at purchasing FME Server for. Being able to validate your data and actually your incoming data and actually push back on the supplier perhaps more gently than you would have done previously. And by that I mean that actually you can push back by supplying the person who's giving you data. You can supply them with a failure report. Perhaps you agreed a series of standards with them initially, and what you need to do is make sure that they're adhering to those standards. Well, if you give them a compliance report, well, maybe they can go away and try and fix up their data, and the next time they submit it, it'll be a little bit better. Let's go and have a look at what I mean by that kind of thing. So if we just dive over to my local instance of FME Server again, rather than the demos that are on SAFE's site, we can go and have a look at a validation process. What I'll do is just show you that process first in FME Desktop. So I'm just going to launch FME Desktop. I'll go and have a look at the workspace over here as well. So that's the publish process. Here's FME Desktop appearing behind the scenes. Just wait for that to appear. It's just launching a workspace. Okay, so you should be able to see that in a bit of detail. Let me zoom in. What happens here is I'm reading in a spreadsheet. This is just some housing data, a spreadsheet of housing information. There happens to be a postcode in here and a few bits of other content. Let's go and have a look at the source data in a bit of detail. Completely fictitious content really, but effectively a bunch of properties stored in here. And you can see there's a property reference and flat numbers and that kind of thing stored in here. We want to check that this housing stock information is good. Now, if you were an FME Desktop user, you would read in the Excel spreadsheet, run it through a transformer like the UK postcode validator to make sure it's okay. Once the postcodes have been validated, you could then send them off to an API like the postcode.io API. In this case, the HTTP caller is going to send each postcode and see if it actually exists, get back a JSON report from the API, parse it, grab out of there some coordinates and put them on a map. A couple of new features in here in FME 2016 is the ability to create a report, an HTML report. In this case, it's actually going to have a map inside it. This is a really great little transformer, the HTML report generator. Write this data out directly to HTML. And I'm going to stream this process. So I'm not going to run this in FME Desktop. I'm going to go and publish this to FME Server. I've done it already, so I don't need to go through those steps, but effectively you can check that you can connect to your FME Server instance, and once you're connected you can then go and publish it to a particular repository and then register it with a specific service. So I'm just going to dive out of there, close this down. I don't need to do that. Over here you can see that this is the repository. There's the same workspace. It's registered with the data streaming service. There is just one that it's registered with. And what I need to do is pick up the spreadsheet, drag it across, upload it. So the assumption here is that you're an individual sitting outside of an organization. You're uploading a data file to them, and you want to run that through this process. Now this is registered to stream the output, which was HTML. It'll stream it back to the web browser, and hopefully once all of the calls have been made to postcode.io, check that each of those postcodes is valid or not, and give me a little map report to tell me. And here we go, it streams back to a new browser tab. And you can see that we've got a map to indicate that these are the postcodes, these are the properties that had good postcodes, and there's a little tooltip to indicate the ones that were good, shown on an Esri backdrop map. And that was just a little HTML report that was created using that one transformer, the HTML report generator. And then the table at the bottom shows all of the problem data. So these are the bad postcodes, and this is what the problem is with them. All the bad ones are listed at the top of the table, and anything that was good is listed down below. These were badly formatted, so they've been fixed. But anything where there is no problem will end up on the map, assuming that was found to be in existence. So a nice little report there to push back on the user so they can go and find and try and fix these individual problems for these property IDs. Next time they submit it, hopefully there won't be as many or any problems as a result. When it comes to producing a map as a service, this can sometimes be handy, actually getting an authored map, and sometimes people use PDF as an approach to that, or KML, or perhaps a geodatabase. But however they choose to do it, there are a number of options. There is a very good example on the Knowledge Center that it's worth going and have a look at. And what I'll urge you to think about is in the old days, perhaps you would put a map on your website, and effectively somebody goes to click on a hyperlink on your web page, and that links out to a PDF, and that PDF is hosted on your file server, and every time you need to change that map you have to create it manually and replace the file that's hosted on your web page. Well, imagine a scenario where actually, rather than the user clicking on that link and downloading a PDF that is hosted, why can't that map be automatically generated at runtime? As soon as the person clicks the map, the link, they download a PDF, but the PDF has just been generated at that moment in time. What you'll notice here is that I've just clicked on a PDF link, but up in the browser there's actually a link to run an FME server job. And you can see that there's the host, FME server. It's a streaming service. The repository name is demos, that's the directory, and here's the name of the workspace that just dynamically produced this map. And if I wanted to go and have a look at a different section of this PDF, I could click on one of these little zones down at the bottom here to go and show me another portion of the map. You see the URL now changes to give me a different part of the map there. I've got the tile M24, well that's right on the edge, so maybe I'll go and pick a different one. In this case I could go for M26, and now I've got a more interesting map just by changing the URL. By changing the URL, I have sent a request over to FME Server to run the job and generate that data map PDF dynamically. The content that's appearing on the map is coming out of my database, so I know that it's always going to be up to date. Map as a service in a true sense, getting live real-time information into that PDF every time somebody downloads it. Then we've got business intelligence scenarios. Well, I told you that my acronyms were going to start to get a bit obscure and perhaps not ideal, but hey, here's a spatial query as a service, a QAAS, where you can find out find the nearest scenario. So what we've got is the ability here, if I just pop up a little workspace to show you what's behind the scenes. We have an approach that's going to use that SQL, that little MySQL database, SQLite, I beg your pardon, database. There's a number of layers in there. It's got a postcode boundary data set, a district boundary data set, parliament regions, and some settlement locations. We're going to read those feature types in, use the FME 2016 Attribute Manager to throw away attributes that we don't need, rename other attributes, just generally tidy up the schema. Use the junction feature to collate those and point them over to the point on area overlayer. What's going to come into this process, this creator, if I just prompt and run this, we're going to create an X and Y coordinate. So the user gets the ability to type in an X and Y, and based on that X and Y, where are they? What's the detail around that particular location? The neighbor finder is going to find the nearest settlement to the X and Y location, and they're going to find out which of the parliament regions, the district boroughs, or the postcode sectors that they've dropped inside, and write that data out to KML. So if we run this process in desktop, we'd get a KML result. What I'm actually going to do is run this over on FME Server. So if I dive over to Server, I need to go and find my own FME Server again, which is hiding somewhere back here. So I need to go and run an existing workspace. So I've got a Where Am I process, and you can see in here this is again registered with data streaming. If I run this with this X and Y coordinate typed into here, what I'm hoping to get back is to stream a KML file. Now the trouble is that certain browsers stream in different ways. Chrome actually streams, and it makes it look like it's downloading the file. If you did this with Internet Explorer, you effectively stream the KML directly into Google Earth. Over here, if I just click on that, you can see that Google Earth is launching, and it'll take us over to the location of the X and Y that we just typed in. So here we go, we're off into Scotland. There's my location pinpoint. I'll let that refresh on screen, and then if I click on it, we can see that we've got a tooltip there, pops up and says, well, I've landed, the X and Y was in the city of Edinburgh, it's in the EH10 postcode, Lothian is the Parliament region, Morningside is the nearest settlement, and it's 971 metres away, so just under a kilometre to go. So if we go back to that FME process, come into here and change the X and Y that we pass in. So if we go to our Where Am I, and if we say, well, that's going to be an X and Y of 307 in British National Grid coordinates, and an X and Y of 655. And bear in mind, this is a bit of a clunky way of adding some content in here, but this is just a demo, right? Effectively, your application might be a web map that someone clicks on, and it gives them the result in the map. So if we run this with a different X and Y, hopefully we'll get a different KML file. And now in Google Earth, we dive over to the new location, and we can now click on it and get to find out, well, the nearest settlement to that location is a place called Tarbrax, and that's just under 4.5 kilometres away, and this is a location in West Lothian this time. So you can use different approaches to how you trigger jobs in FME, and one of the interesting things there is that you can use different applications to as clients to FME Server. What I've got that's opening up here is an Excel spreadsheet, and I've actually put the full URL in there, but you would normally hide this under some sort of hyperlink. Here's a spreadsheet. Each of these perhaps would just be a hyperlinked name or location name. If I click on one of these URLs in the spreadsheet, I'm effectively somebody who only knows how to use Excel and Google Earth. I don't know what this does behind the scenes. I don't realize that this is FME Server in the background that's doing the work. All I need to have been given is some access credentials to run this job. So by running this job, hopefully what that's going to do is download a new file, and now up pops Google Earth and takes us to a new location. So effectively, Excel is now a client of FME Server, and you can use it to go and query information and get information about a particular location in a different application, whatever that might be. So if I just dive back to Excel one more time, click on another link, and you can see that as soon as you do that, we run a job, we download a KML, and now we can dive off to another location in Google Earth. So all sorts of variations on how you can set this up, but here Excel is the client. When it comes to real-time information, there's a nice few approaches that you can take with FME. One thing that I've certainly seen a lot more of in recent months is the use of FME to work with APIs. And those APIs don't have to return spatial information. So in this case, what I've done is look at querying a train timetable. So if we dive over to a process in my FME server, TransLink is the rail supplier in Northern Ireland. They have an API that allows you to query train times and a train timetable. It's a real-time train timetable. I have a workspace that has an HTTP caller in it that effectively hits the API, passes in my start train station and the train station I want to go to. And you can see I have a little pick list here that I can choose from. So maybe I want to go from Belfast Central to Bangor. If I run that workspace, it'll hit the API. My workspace writes out to HTML, which is then streamed into a new tab in this browser. And here you can see that the next trains that go from Belfast to Bangor, well, the next one is it's in about 20 minutes time at 12 minutes past 12. It's got 9 stops. There's the stops it goes to. It's going to come in at platform 4 and it'll get to Bangor at 12:43. So they're the next few trains that I can get. If I dive back to that front page again, I could say, well, actually, I'm going to go from City Hospital instead. So give me the details again. Let's have the train timetable, and you can see that FME Server resizes to any application, so you could quite easily have this rendering on a phone or a tablet for users to use as well. So really just wanted to touch on that last example there because it's an interesting approach. It doesn't have the spatial angle. Well, it sort of does, but it doesn't have any geometry. It just gives you a tabular response. People buy and use and invest in FME for a number of different reasons. There are all sorts of reasons why you might be interested in it. Data download service is very commonly the reason for people setting up FME Server, to give people within your organisation or outside of your organisation, maybe contractors, access to particular data sets in a self-service manner. The validation problem is a very key one, often used to get data into an organisation, but using FME as the data sentry to try and work through any problems that the incoming data has. And then getting FME to respond to a trigger event, whether that's an email or a tweet or another application, perhaps Oracle is triggering something to happen, then the notification service is very handy for that kind of thing. This has been a very whistle-stop tour of some of the capabilities of FME Server, and I hope it's been of use to those of you that have attended this session. Appreciate you spending the time with us today. You're welcome to go over to our YouTube site, youtube.com/OneSpatialGroup. All of our recent webinars have been posted up there, and of course this one will be there later today if you want to look at any of the session again. I'd encourage you to go and take a look at onespatial.com/FME, where you can find a little bit more about what we do and some of the FME products. But knowledge.safe.com should be your first port of call for further technical questions. There are a lot of articles available over on that website. Would encourage you to take a look if you haven't done already. But for now, I'd like to thank you very much, and we invite any questions through the chat window or afterwards. Please feel free to get in touch, either direct with myself or fme@onespatial.com. We'd like to hear from you, and thank you very much for your time.